if you are a general and you are using masculine energy, you would say, tomorrow we're going into battle and we're going to go from A to B to C to D. That's masculine energy, very direct, we got a plan. It's feminine energy would go in and say, it's all about the nuance. You need to know that between A and B, there's a forest. Between B and C, there's a swamp. So you can't really have one without the other successfully, because if you're just going in from A to B to C to D, you're missing what kinds of things are you going to do to allow for the swamp. So one creates the framework and the other creates the nuance, and you need them both. And in fact, many spiritual teachers would say masculine takes energy only based on the spirit or the belief system or the heart of the feminine. So you need to have that first, because it's the passion that makes the action. I hope that answers your question. Yes?
I wanted to ask, so with the kind of gender imbalance in industry at the moment, and historically, there's a lot more efforts going into kind of women's management development programs and stuff. But sometimes there's some resistance amongst the male employees, because then they feel they kind of get left behind, and where's the development opportunities for them? And from everything we've talked about this evening, the gender physics, there's actually a lot for people with masculine and feminine traits to learn from
Yes.
the other ends of the spectrum. So how do employers and companies, particularly in construction and engineering, how do they create development programs that address both of those things so no one gets left behind, you get a whole pool of better managers and leaders, but it also addresses gender imbalance and empowers more women into leadership positions?
Good question. Thank you. So you're absolutely right. Companies, when I first started talking about all this stuff, I would go out and talk to people and say that, companies' results were so much better if they had diversity, and the research at that time was relatively new, and people had to be convinced that that was even true. Well, now that's a widely accepted fact. And now I find that the companies are really wanting to get women into the company and wanting to promote them, because they recognize that it is giving them better results. So, for example, I had CEO of a decent-sized who said, I'm wanting to get more women in jobs, but I'm not finding that they're applying. And I said, well, you have to understand that you're probably writing job postings that are too aspirational, that you're putting in all these characteristics that would be nice to have, but you don't really expect to get them. And by and large, men do not have trouble applying for jobs where they don't meet all the requirements, and women think they need to check every box before they'll apply. So why don't you scale back your job postings and put in a couple words that women have been trained to think that they should be, such as maybe say, I want someone who's supportive and enthusiastic. And I said, I bet you'll get more women applying. So companies understand they need more women, and they understand that it's a patriarchal system, and they're trying to make women feel more comfortable. I know this is a long answer, but I'm getting to your question. And I also, talk to organizations where I'll have the head of the organization say, well, women are leaving, they have a baby, and then they leave. And I say, no. Those women are leaving not because they have had a baby, but because you have not made them feel like they're truly part of the team. If you really accepted them and made them feel that they were listened to and that their contribution was important, they would find a way to make it work to stay. But they obviously are not feeling like they really fit in. So that's part of your job. So I think companies are struggling with, how do I make these women that I know I need feel comfortable? And so I should be doing development programs. And so often those development programs don't really help what we really need is for men and women to be taking the programs in the same way that there's value in diversity, so that you get all of the different opinions at the table before you go public with them. It's important to have men and women taking these, because if I spoke today at lunch at Sun Life, and there were men in the room that were saying, I'm here because I want to develop a team of women, and I want to better understand how I can make that happen. So I think that for all of us, we need to be doing this together. This is not, the problem is we're born, when we're labeled pink or blue, we kind of get on our team and we try to make our team right and the other team wrong, because that's sort of the binary mentality of yes, no, black, white. It's labeling things, trying to make your side right, the other side wrong. I really like mixed groups where people come together and try to find solutions together. And every time that a man goes to a conference with women where he learns about women's issues, he is more sensitized to it. That's why paternity leave is so important. In countries where paternity leave is considered where it is mandatory, they say that it is the greatest thing for women since women got the vote. Because men then feel that they are an equal in the parenting. They're not just responsible for the income. And that means that so everybody learns together. And that, I agree with you, that's what we need. We just have to get companies, I think that would have a greater effect in breaking down the system. But I do also think that networks, and unless you have these programs, they often don't build them up. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, I'm Jenny. From about a year ago, so I'm fairly new in my technical field. I really like how you talked about what a good manager is, how they find out what your strong attributes are and put you where you fit best. But what if your manager exhibits a strong gender bias, and to the extent that they put you in a gender-specific box and give you tasks that are associated with your gender attribute? Do you have any advice on how to, like, as a first step, how to communicate with them and kind of like show that?
Good question. Thank you. Yeah. So I think really what you need to be able to do is do things that would not be expected of the feminine energy attributes. So for example, put up your hand and volunteer for a stretch assignment. So that they think somebody who's putting you in a gender box thinks that women are going to be cautious and they're not going to take a risk by volunteering for something that's clearly going to be difficult. But if you put up your hand and volunteer for a stretch assignment, that manager's got to look at you differently. So I would say, have a look at the masculine attributes and exhibit them, and then make a joke about it. I know this is not what you're expecting from me, but this is what you're going to get from me. Because I can play both sides of this.
Sometimes they don't realize.
What's that?
Sometimes the manager doesn't realize that that's what they're doing. And I see that all the time. I'll give you an example. We have a customer coming over. There are men and women in the team. The manager goes to the female and asks, oh, can you order coffee? Can you order food? It has happened to me many times. Okay, Joe is sitting beside me. Why aren't you asking Joe? Why does it happen? Most of the time, they don't realize.
I understand. I agree with you. I went through a lot of that as well.
Yeah. Say no.
Mm-hmm. So for those of you, because this lady wasn't on a microphone, for those of you who didn't hear, what she was saying is so often women are asked to do the helping jobs, such as ordering the lunch and cleaning. I used to go into a management meeting where I was the only woman there, and all the guys would drink their coffee and leave them all on the table. And I knew that just meant one of the secretaries had to come and clean them up, and I knew that would just tick them off. And so I would say, okay guys, I am a woman and I'm cleaning up not because I have a biological need, but because I respect our secretaries, and why don't all of you take your coffee cups as well? So just kind of make a joke, I remember, so one of my stories is that I had in my department, we used to, every month when it was somebody's birthday, we would have I'd get a cake and I'd invite everybody from the floor and we'd have a little coffee party, let them blow out the candles. So the guy that was, this is fairly early in my career, the guy that was the president of I was working in sales at the time. The guy that was the president of sales came by my office one day and said, Betty-Ann, it's Andrew's birthday. Where's his cake? And I was like, Andrew's not in my department. Like, now in charge of all the birthday cakes? And I was like ticked. I had this really wonderful woman in my department who was really better balanced than I was. And she came in and was kind of laughing and said, did Doug stop by your office and ask where Andrew's birthday cake was? And I said, yeah, as if we've done something wrong because Andrew doesn't have a cake and Andrew's in his department. She said, well, I told him that we would have a cake once a month for everybody on the floor whose birthday had been that month. And I was like, oh, you're so smart. Like, why didn't I think of that? So, finding the alternate position, like so often we get ourselves into a binary thinking of, he's telling me I have to buy the cake, I'm getting my dander up, I'm not buying the cake. Where if you look for the third alternative, that can be the winning answer. Apparently, Isidore Sharp, when he developed the Four Seasons model, there were hotels out there that were either motor hotels or luxury hotels, and he wanted something in the middle, the business hotel and the luxury hotel, and he didn't want to be one or the other. He came up with a third alternative, and that was to have a hotel for business people that had all the luxury items, and that is what made him a fortune. He didn't go to one or the other, he found the third alternative. So try that.
I'm Betty-Ann's husband. Betty-Ann, tell them the story about how you fought to go to that one meeting to present your program. Remember that you developed this whole program.
Oh yeah, okay, all right, sure, okay. Okay, okay. So
Let me say one more thing and I'll sit down. I don't get to talk now. Anyway, I'm very impressed with seeing all of you here. There's it looks to me like an equal amount of women and men engineers here. So I think that's great. And you men, kudos to you all for coming here today.
And thank you to my husband for driving me here. I'm not a good driver. So this was actually one Potash. And so I was in sales, you heard me say that, was in my first job at Potash, and I put together a sales manual because we were a very acquisitive company. We'd bought all these other companies, and people were kind of like, for one company, how do we do that? Another company, how do we do that? And I was like, we need a manual that everybody can refer to. So I put together the sales manual. The sales meeting was coming up. I walked down the hall. I gave it to our president of sales, good old Doug that I mentioned earlier. And I said, here it is, all ready to go. Make whatever changes you want before I present it at the sales meeting in 3 weeks. And he said, great, we really needed this, but by the way, you won't be going to the meeting. And I was like, what? He said, no, there's a lot of swearing happens at those meetings. It wouldn't be appropriate to have a woman there.
What year was this?
1982.
Okay, yeah.
And I felt like somebody had kicked me in the gut. I said, well, who's going to present the sales manual? Well, Gary can do it. I said, Gary doesn't know anything about it. This will not be presenting this. And he said, well, I said, Doug, you need to understand, I grew up in a small town above the bar. There is nothing that these guys can say that I haven't heard since I was 6 years old. And I said, I knew it was important for me to draw a line in the sand, but I also knew I had to give him an opportunity to save face. So I said, I hope you will reconsider. It's very important for me to be there in order for this program to be a success, and I hope that you will see your way clear to make a change so that I can be there. I went down the hall to this guy who was a vice president, was very influential, really upset, using a lot of those words that they probably were using at the sales meeting that he didn't think I should hear. And he said, leave it with me. And then I went and talked to a whole bunch of my peers. So this is the importance of having networks. All these guys that I hung out with that were really my peers, and said, you guys are all going to sales meeting to present your programs. I'm not going to be allowed to because I might hear swearing because I'm a woman and my delegate ears can't. And they said, I said, I need you to talk to your bosses to influence Doug. Between this guy that was a mentor to me and all these peers who talked to their bosses, Doug came down to my office and said, you know, Betty-Ann, I think you should go and do that. So I went to that meeting. After that, for the rest of the time in sales, I went to sales meetings. Women have been going ever since, obviously. But we need to be able to stand up for ourselves, to draw that line in the sand. We have to be able to give our bosses opportunities to save face. We need to have mentors who will speak up on our behalf, and we need to cultivate a network who will also support us. And those are all feminine energy characteristics. So it works for men and for women to use those.